You just saw something that shouldn't be possible. And now your brain has to figure out how to process this impossible event. In 2009, Dr. Paris put people in brain scanners to observe people's brain activity while they watched magic tricks. By doing this, we can start to understand what parts of the brain are responsible for processing impossible information. And what Dr. Paris discovered is that when people witness something impossible, like they do during a magic trick, a part of the brain known as the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, abbreviated as the ACC, becomes more active. Now, numerous other studies have identified that one of the primary functions of the ACC is to identify discrepancies between predictions and actual events. Now, let's unpack that. You see, our brain can be thought of as a prediction machine. We're constantly creating models of how the world works. And when I say model, all I mean is a kind of understanding of the rules that govern our world and the universe. For example, if I were to tell you that I was about to drop this paper ball, your internal model of the world would tell you to expect the ball to move downwards. And this is because of a rule that we have in our model that we call gravity. If I had a goal to catch this ball before it hit the table, I need to be able to predict its future movement. And I'm able to make this prediction because I have this internal model of how the world works. When something happens that's contrary to our predictions, our brain needs to get us to pay very close attention to that event because it represents an important learning opportunity. If I were to take this paper ball and drop it and it didn't fall, you've now experienced an important violation of expectation. I'm currently 25 years old, which means I have experienced 25 years of gravity working correctly. My internal model about the world says that when something's weight becomes unsupported, it will fall. Not most of the time it will fall 100% of the time. And now my model produced an incorrect prediction, which means if I am to believe what I just saw, my model must be incomplete. And so now your brain needs to send an alert signal that says, hey, pay attention, pay very close attention, because we just witnessed something that does not fit our model of the world. And we need to understand why as soon as possible, because at this point in our life, gravity is a pretty important component of how we understand the world. And now this is where everything ties together, because the part of the brain that sends that alert signal, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC, and that signal is then experienced as amazement, wonder, or awe. This is the underlying neural circuitry that magicians are able to exploit in order to artificially generate this experience of amazement or surprise. But this is where the idea of the brain being a prediction machine becomes really cool. We know that the ACC responds to prediction errors. It turns out that it's actually possible to mathematically model how much a prediction deviates from how an event actually unfolds. And using this idea, it might be possible to mathematically calculate how amazing any particular magic trick might be. And this is all done using something called Bayesian statistics. Here's the idea. Imagine you're walking home one day and you meet someone on the street corner who claims to be able to read your mind. They take out, say, 10 playing cards and tell you that to think of one of them at random. How amazed you feel if this were to happen depends on two things. First, the simple probability of them guessing your card at random. In this case, it's 1 out of 10 because you have 10 cards and you're just thinking of one of them. And 1 out of 10 is not great odds, but they're not drastically impossible either. So maybe if they repeated this multiple times, then it might become more amazing. However, your amazement also depends on to what degree you are convinced that psychics exist. If you're fully convinced that psychics are real out there, you're not going to be very amazed if someone manages to read your mind. Just like you wouldn't be amazed if the sun is to rise tomorrow because you already wholeheartedly believe that it's going to. And what this means is how amazed you feel in response to an event is a function of not only the event itself, but also your prior beliefs of how the world works, what is and isn't possible. And this relationship between prior beliefs and new events can be formalized in what's known as Bayes' theorem. What Bayes' theorem allows us to calculate is the probability of a certain event occurring based on our prior knowledge of the world. And then when we get new data or a new experience, Bayes' theorem also prescribes a way to update our internal model of how the world works. When we experience an event that should have a 0 probability of occurring, at least according to our prior beliefs of the world, the resulting Bayesian model changes quite dramatically. The ACC will then send a larger signal, which then translates to experiencing more amazement. And this idea could be used to explain why some magic tricks seem more amazing than others. The larger the mismatch between our prior beliefs of the world and a new experience, the more amazement we should feel. Now, realistically, we're not going to actually be able to mathematically model a magic trick. Real life is immensely more complicated than these pet examples. And it can be really difficult, if not impossible, to quantify someone's complex prior beliefs about how the world works in numbers so that we could calculate something with them. However, even without being able to mathematically calculate the amazement of a trick, understanding how this neural circuit works still offers some important conclusions for magicians. Some of the most common performing advice that magicians receive is to not overprove the legitimacy of your props. Spending too much time trying to prove that a deck of cards is normal not only interrupts the flow of your performance, but it also frames your trick as a puzzle that the audience needs to solve. And in fact, some magicians argue that you should skip the entire prop inspection phase altogether, because if a prop is truly genuine, why would it need to be inspected? The cognitive neuroscience, however, tells a very different story. Spending the time and effort to carefully sculpt an audience's prior beliefs of the current situation could turn what is normally an unimpressive trick into a true miracle. To be clear, I don't want to discount the time-tested advice. Turning a performance into a puzzle and disrupting a flow of a performance is a true risk. But I do wonder if we've gone too far in that direction. It might be worth spending a little bit of extra effort to prove the legitimacy of the current situation in order to produce a larger prediction error when the payoff of the trick happens. The more certain that you make your audience that they understand the world, the larger the mismatch will be between their prediction of what will happen and the actual events when the trick pays off. If you'd like to read any more about this topic, I've listed a number of important papers in the description. And with that, I will see you next time.